It feels sexual. It's orgasmic. You could say it's like being in an orgasm that doesn't quit. And that is why the churches have made sex something so guilt ridden, because they don't want the people to reach that state of enlightenment. They don't want that energy running through people. And so, part of every takeover plan is to get control of what the people think. And if you can get them to start self-censoring, then you're halfway there. So we started back in the days. I'm actually going to do a piece on this, a whole piece on my Patreon thing about back in the day when the matriarchy was, when God was considered to be a woman. At that point in time, they had sexual rituals that the whole tribe or the whole town engaged in. Why? Because they knew that that was a pathway or a gateway to awakening. And they would watch and listen, and there was all kinds of talk about this is what you would experience, and this is what your gifts would be, so that they had a focus on development of the human to full potential. That was the civilizational goal.
Welcome back, Penny. I'm so glad you're here. You left us with some very thought-provoking questions on part one. And
Okay.
let's do a deep dive in those now. If you didn't see part one with Penny Kelly, it will be linked in the description box down below. It's a must-see. It really is a must-see. What we're going to be talking about in this section is doing a little bit of a deeper dive into how do we work with ourselves so that we're clear on what we're looking for in our civilization on this planet, and how do we move forward to build the kind of planet that we all want to live on. And I can tell you, I read Penny Kelly's book, The Revival, and did a whole book club on it. And there were so many thought-provoking questions in it that really address this topic. And I can remember, Penny, when I read that question, gosh, it was something like, it was something basic. You're going to giggle at this. It was like, well, what kind of world do you want to live in? And I'm like, it was like asking a fish where they like to live instead of water. It's like, what?
Yeah, okay.
And it really was because so many of us, we have been, in my opinion, so indoctrinated from the minute we're born to not connect with our spiritual gifts, to not really listen to our intuitive self, to not follow our heart, to not trust other people. We're so indoctrinated from the very beginning that to ask a human what they really want out of life, particularly in a first world country, you probably get a blank stare from most of them. We have done what we've been told to do.
Right.
And what you're talking about on the new earth is we're now going to live a more heart-centered, more authentic existence. And I know those are a little buzzwordy, but they definitely I think they get the point across.
Let's start with let me go back to Kundalini for a moment and just make a statement that I think is a theme that we might want to keep in mind if we're talking about a new earth, creating a new earth or a new world, reshaping the one we have or whatever, something new. So when you have a full-blown Kundalini experience, you go into what's called the void. It's this place of where there's nothing there. There is nothing there, and you can see forever. It's like you're looking across the sky at across the universe, and there's these little tiny pinpoints of light, tiny, tiny pinpoints of light. That's what you see, are those pinpoints of light. What you hear is utter silence, nothing. So there's nothing to see and nothing to hear, but what you feel is absolute and utter bliss. It's a fulfillment and a contentment and it's a joy, it's a bliss, it's an ecstasy that there's no words for it. And what you know, what you see, what you hear, what you feel is accompanied by what you know. And what you know is that this is God. Everything is made from these lights, this silence, and this feeling of bliss. That's the core of everything. And what becomes apparent when you come out of that is that you are the one that's creating using that stuff, that God stuff. And that the world would be empty if we did not take on the role of the creatorship. The creator self has to begin creating consciously because we have all of that power within us. And when you don't create consciously, you create a mess. And we have something of a mess. So that the step that has to be taken is into this conscious personal responsibility for what is being created, conscious creatorship.
I want to ask you a question I've thought about a number of times and have never brought it up when we've been together.
Uh-huh.
In your opinion, is the Kundalini energy that you are now running, you are running the Kundalini energy, is
Right.
that the natural state of humans? In other words, are we all supposed to have that energy and that's
Yeah.
been shut down?
Yes, that's the energy that it's the energy of an expanded consciousness. Kundalini is, by definition, the full awakening of consciousness. And when it awakens, there's no boundaries to consciousness. There's no other. You read people's minds, you know what they're saying, you know what they're doing, you see what's coming, you see what was in the past. It's it's a consciousness that has no bounds. And when you step into that kind of consciousness and you've been raised to be a good little Catholic girl, and now you're seeing what people really think, and you're feeling what they feel, and you're knowing what they know, and you're seeing what they're doing, it's a whole different ball game. And it's not only frightening, it's really saddening. And you have to work to get back to the joy, that bliss, and eventually you keep your toe in that bliss all the time. So I have that. It's extra energy that runs through you. The more frequency, the more energy that's running through you, then the more your consciousness expands and the more things you know and can do and can understand, etc.
So
So
why do some people,
that's meant to run through everyone. Let me emphasize that again.
and I believe that, but why do some people have it, have the experience, and some people don't? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I do. So let's go back to the beginning of when the repression started. When you are in that state, it is very similar to being in a highly sexualized state. It feels sexual. It's orgasmic. You could say it's like being in an orgasm that doesn't quit. And that is why the churches have made sex something so guilt ridden, because they don't want the people to reach that state of enlightenment. They don't want that energy running through people. And so part of every takeover plan is to get control of what the people think. And if you can get them to start self-censoring, then you're halfway there. So we started back in the days. I'm actually going to do a piece on this, a whole piece on my Patreon thing about back in the day when the matriarchy was, when God was considered to be a woman. At that point in time, they had sexual rituals that the whole tribe or the whole town engaged in. Why? Because they knew that that was a pathway or gateway to awakening. And they would watch and listen, and there was all kinds of talk about this is what you would experience, and this is what your gifts would be, so that they had a focus on development of the human to full potential. That was the civilizational goal. That had to be countered. And even
Ah,
though we have symbols of the great goddess, worship of the great goddess, that go back 800,000 years, in the past 5,000 years or so, we're not sure. I'm going to say 2 to 5,000. We have been taken over, and the church has made sex something only for procreation, and it's guilt ridden, and it's only between a husband and a wife. And I mean, there's all kinds, they've just fouled up the whole sexual thinking with all these rules and do's and don'ts. And that's where we are today, with all those rules and do's and don'ts. And then they use that to crucify people publicly. And we're seeing that happen now. So that's it's I mean, there's a whole lot more I could say about that, but let's let it go at that. That's why we don't have that energy running through us, because we shut it off. We tamp it down. We hide it. We feel guilty about it. Well, you can't be free to have consciousness flowing through you when all of that has been made like off limits.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. So let's go ahead and dive into, we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the questions that you had addressed in part one so that we can start moving into taking this planet back and taking ourselves back.
Are you sure you're ready?
I hope so.
Okay. All right. Well, I think the, the the basic thing that we have to start with is, what's your worldview? You know, what is that? What do you believe in? Right now, that's under attack. That's coming apart. And it that worldview that most of us have had. I'm not sure I can I okay, let me ask you a question. What How would you describe your worldview, your view of the world? Can you even begin to say
Are you asking about describing my place in the world or how I perceive the world?
how you perceive the world?
I perceive it as having a lot of potential. I mean,
Okay,
I'm in love with the planet. I'm in love with the planet. I'm in love with the concept of humans. I think humans have been severely damaged.
I know. Yeah.
And I think that we're in a mess. And don't come after me in the comments, you guys, but I think that humans need to grow up. They're
Yeah.
they're they're running around, even the most mature of us are running around like children, expecting someone else or something else to handle it. I think that it's time that we're either going to grow up or we're
Yeah.
going to have to start all over again.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, so that's the first question that people have to ask themselves is, how do I see the world? And it we could start with, is it a place of goodness or is it a place of evil? Is it
Goodness,
a place of joy or is it a place of pain?
joy.
Okay, that's the basic bottom line of a worldview. And then from there, you go on and you say, okay, if I'm not experiencing that goodness and that joy, then am I in the right spot? Am I in the right culture? Am I in the right geographic location? Am I in the right climate? Am I with the right people? Am I in the right business or corporation or job? Am I doing the work that I would love to do? So you have to begin with, if I'm not experiencing that goodness and joy, what is the problem? And the problem is often the self, your own decisions. And I'm guilty of the same thing. You know, change comes, and I'm like, but 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 you know, I don't want to have to deal with that change, and you have to deal with it. And so that really, it comes down to, are you willing to deal with change? Does change excite you or does it frighten you? If it frightens you, why? I would be willing to venture an answer for that, but what would you say? Why are people afraid of change?
Because they don't have faith in themselves.
Yes, they don't think they could handle what that change demands.
And but Penny, at the bottom of it, everything that we bring up, or every point about this whole takeover thing that it comes up for me, what comes up for me is that from the minute, and I said this in part one, the minute that we're born, we're just indoctrinated to
Yeah.
not trust ourselves, that you have to do this to be successful, that you have to go this. I can remember when I was doing the book club, the revival, and it was during one of our discussions about it, and you said by time a child is 12,
Right.
they should be able to survive on this planet.
On their own.
Feed on their own, feed themselves, shelter,
Yep.
take care of their bodies, interact with their environment. And I thought, I'm a mother. I was very proud of my mothering. I mean, it was the light of my life being a mother. And I realized I did everything wrong.
Oh,
I mean, I loved my kids to pieces, but I did everything that society told me to do. Either one of my children at 12 could not have survived at the mall alone
right. Yeah.
because
That's
what
funny.
I did, we all do. I fed them the food from the grocery store and I sent them to government schools. And so it is if, here I'm 67, you're close to my age.
I'm
How
way
do you,
older.
just a few years. So
Yeah.
now we're looking at everything that we've done our entire lives
Yeah.
has not served us.
I know it has served another agenda, and
Yes.
that's really discouraging. But don't focus on what is not working or what you think you did wrong. Instead, say, oh, wow, I now have a basis for comparison about what really works long term and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you start moving in the direction of, okay, what does work? What
And
will,
that's forward focus instead of backward focus,
that's right.
which we get locked into.
Yeah,
Regret.
yeah. There's a lot of, if you don't know how to survive, then you run up against, you don't have many options. You have to know how to survive. And there are people who train other people how to survive out in the woods, in the fields, in the jungles, in Mother Nature. Take a class with somebody. There are people who will gather together and likely, and I've seen this a number of times as we move into the future, there are people who know how to survive and people who come around them saying, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they do, and so they learn.
Yeah.
And you need time to observe how things work and not just observe the obvious things, but the subtle feeling, what happens when I don't do that? What happens when I do this? What happens, etc. And as a child, we had chickens, we had a goat, etc. We grew all of our own food and we traded that with other people who were kind of itinerant people who came around in some beat up old station wagon with bushels of apples or bushels of fruit plums or and we still had access to the farm, my grandmother's farm, where we got beef and chicken and pork and things like that. So but it was when I actually bought a farm and got chickens and cows and geese and ducks and turkeys and all kinds of stuff. I went out and sat in the yard for an entire year, not 24/7, but regularly just sat on a stump and just watched those chickens and how they behaved. And that was an education in itself. I did the same thing with my cows. You learn cow talk, you learn chicken talk, you learn geese talk and turkey talk. and and I found that we were telling our grandchildren, because we had grandchildren here, that it would be interesting if they could learn to make sounds that you couldn't tell if that was a real goose or if that was a child, if that was a bird or if that was a child. if that was a cow or a chicken or if that was a child. And we all learned how to make certain sounds that got the animal's attention. And then once you had their attention, from my point of view, that's when telepathy happens. The cow knows, the goose knows, the turkey knows, and they're bright. They're so bright. So that whole that part of life is missing for millions and millions of children in the West. Now, in Africa, maybe in Southeast Asia, it's a little bit different. Among the indigenous, maybe different. But where's our connection to nature and our ability to get the attention of an animal and then communicate with it? That's a piece of something that we haven't learned. And so that potential is waiting to be developed. So, I'll stop there and just say, okay, what's next?
What's next on your list?
Oh, okay. So, I think what really has to happen here is, what is the worldview? What do you believe the development of the human should be? How did anybody ever broach that idea that you're not finished? You're not finished developing. You're not finished growing up. There are other stages of development that are yet to be uncovered and lived and enjoyed. So let's start with just the belief systems, because that's critical. You need something to believe in. And that came right out of the robe's mouth. If you don't have anything to believe in, you're not going to make it through these changes. You have to have something to hang on to. You have to have something you're moving toward. And so, what most people believe in is that there's something greater than themselves. That something greater than themselves gives you something to hang on to when you get a terrible disease, or when you have a bad accident, or when your spouse comes along and says, I don't love you anymore, I want a divorce, or whatever it is. You need something greater than yourself to hang on to. What is that? It's the God within. But if you externalize that God, then somebody comes along, like what's happening now with the Bible, and pulling the rug out from under that Bible and saying, hey, wake up. This Bible is not about God, it has nothing to do with God. People are then interpreting that as, oh my God, there's no God. That's not what that's about.
No, it's not what it's about.
No, the Bible is a book that was mistranslated. That doesn't mean there's no God. And I can personally say there is a God. And that's not belief, that's knowing. And that's having come face to face and stepped into that God state numerous times, because that is what Kundalini is. It's getting you back in touch with the God within, not so that you can brag or carry on or, act all powerful, but so that you can begin to understand that you're the one creating. You're the one. How are you doing that? You're making choices. You're making decisions. If you always take the easy way, sometimes that's not the easy way. So you have to ask, who, what, and where is God if he's not in the Bible? Who is God? Aren't we personifying God with that kind of a question? Is God a who? I don't think so. What is God? God is a field, an endless, eternal field of intelligence and love. Incredible intelligence and love. And what does that intelligence know? It knows one thing: I am.
Yeah.
That's it. And where is that God? That God is what you're made of. Look for that God within. So if you can't do that, if you can't reestablish the God within, there's going to be a period of just being at loose ends, being lost, being unable to focus, not sure what to believe in, etc. Take your time. I have to say, people, if you get into a state like that and the rug is pulled out or the legs on the stool are just cut off, then take your time. It's not something that you can get through overnight or even within a week. And, maybe there'll be some anger at the powers that want to be because they have lied, because they have manipulated, because they have deliberately created this illusion of this transcendent God. And that God is really the transcendent self within you. Something has been taken away from you. Don't be angry. Just go back and take ownership of that transcendent God within, and begin to communicate with that. And there are times when I have been really upset, bawling my eyes out and yelling at God and carrying on. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice coming out of somewhere, and it is a voice that makes your hair stand up. And it's usually one sentence kind of answer to whatever it is I am whining about, what I am crying about. And I'm just going to say that God within is the true self, and that true self is listening, and it will respond. And it has a big voice, a big deep voice. And I've heard that voice more than once. It's a showstopper. Okay. So, it is just hugely powerful. And so that, where's God? If he's not in the Bible, he's in you.
Yeah.
She's in you. It's in you. And you can
Mhm.
personify, you can give that God a name if you want. That's okay. But it's an intelligence, it's an intelligent light that is within you. And the action of that, the feeling of that is this love that just won't stop. And why
And you
would you
know,
want it to?
and why would you want it to? Yeah. You know, it to me, it is perfect timing that the
Yeah.
information about the Bible is coming out now. It's a perfect opportunity
Yeah.
for us to develop a meaningful relationship.
There you go.
Mhm.
There you go. Not only with that God within, but with one another,
Yeah.
with everything that exists, because that God is the basis of everything.
Yeah.
Everything. It's so beautiful when that sinks in all the way. And I was talking to somebody just recently, and he said that he was really very angry when he found out that the Bible was mistranslated, and we had spent all this time, trying to kowtow to what the Bible said. And it's a beautiful story of the Jewish history. So let me repeat, who else has bothered to keep track of their history for that long a time in great detail with all of its warts and all of its successes and all of its beauty and everything? And the Jews, the Hebrews, whatever, whoever those people are, they have kept track of something. They have an identity. We need one. So we're going to run into that. And when when you run into the fact that what even a small piece of your worldview based on God takes a big hit like that, then what happens to your worldview? Wow, everything changes. Everything. And the things, if you go back to the questions, that question, the first one about spirituality, have you deeply or have you moved beyond dogma to the true spirit of the self? Right there, that's the work that has to be done. All of that dogma, yeah, about heaven, about hell, there's all kinds of worlds out there. I've been in quite a few. Some of them are absolutely transcendent. Some are amazing. I'm going to say scientifically amazing. We'll just leave it at that. Some are ridiculous, and some are you never. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to spend 2 seconds in that world. So awful. So awful. I can't emphasize that enough. So your worldview really is based on your belief and how you see God. And when that God moves to within you, there's usually a feeling of, uh-oh, you know, now what? What do I do? And that there's this, it's almost comical in the way that the worries begin. What if I screw something up? What if I do something intending to do something good and it ends up being not good? Well, that's called a mistake. You just fix it. It's not the end of the world. And we have a lot of learning that I think we're going to have to go through. I think we have a lot of information that's kind of waiting in the wings, and that's going to affect our mental, the mental side of ourselves. What do we think about that? It's like, how did that happen? Or why didn't I know that before? Why didn't they teach that in school? I hear that all the time from people. Why didn't they teach us this in school? And that's just about the body and health and healing. So we haven't been taught. Why haven't we been taught to manage the physical using the mental, emotional, and spiritual? Because that's power.
It
And
is. Hmm.
yeah, and they're not really interested. They, meaning the powers that want to be, they're not interested in our power or us coming to our power.
No, they're interested in making sure we don't.
Yeah. So I think, let me say this. I think in terms of, like, if you want to think about this more deeply, what I would suggest is get a piece of paper, a pencil, or a small notebook or something, or even a whiteboard if you have a whiteboard in your house anywhere, a little chalkboard, and write down what are the 5 top things you would like to see in your world. What are those 5 things? Is it peace? Is it more money? Is it all the children are safe? Is it perfect health for yourself and everyone in your family? What is it? Is it something else? Just write down what are your top 5 things that you would like to see in your world. And don't fuss about whether it's a physical thing, a mental, emotional, or a spiritual. Just write down the top 5. And then feel free to add, amend, edit as you go along, making a list. And that begins to reveal who you really are and what you would love to help build. And that I think is critical. And what I think needs to be said, if you're writing down what you would love to have, don't edit out your secret self, your secret heart, because you think, oh, that could never happen. So I won't even bother to put that down. Don't say that. Put it down and let it be there, bold and glaring and obviously impossible to the consciousness you have at the moment, but just let it sit there and let it stare back at you. You will begin to understand at a deep level what kind of world you're really for and what is your alignment. So if you go back to when everything you do nurtures life, you will have eternal life. What happens as you begin to nurture life is that everything comes alive. And there's this wondrous, it's like spring in your heart and your mind, spring in your consciousness. And there's a beauty there that you just say you have to experience it in order to understand the power of that springing up of, hey, I'm free of what I used to think I had to do or had to say or had to be or had to pretend or had to ignore. You're free of that.
Yeah. And it triggers a chain reaction, which it's
Yes.
hard to think about before you do it. But once I do it by focusing on my heart,
Yeah.
and just that intention of focusing on my heart, it just creates this waterfall effect in my life. And it's one of those things is you got to trust to just do it once. Just do it once. And then it's almost, I get hooked on it because the feeling is what we want to have. It's that feeling of bubbliness, giddiness, joy, excitement,
Yep.
looking forward to, wanting to, can't wait to get started kind of feeling.
I know. It's like, okay, I'm going to paint the bedroom, or I'm going to paint the living room, or I'm going to paint the house, or whatever it is. This moment that comes up, and I want to read the first 5 things that I wrote down. Okay, this is
Yes.
now my list has 86 things on it, and I started writing this a few years ago. So it starts out, I want a world, and number one is of great and stunning beauty in a solar system where the sun is young and waxing, because I know some things about the sun and how a solar system renews itself. So that's where that came from. Number two was, I want a world of overflowing abundance for all. Number three, I want a world in which people see and experience their own power to choose a response instead of being sucked into overreaction. Number four, I want a world of excellent communication and cooperation among plants, animals, people, buildings, the sun, the sky, the moon, the stars, the wind, the water, everything. And number five, I want a world of luxury in every detail that surrounds us, whether that's home, equipment, transport, or some other environment. We often limit ourselves. We don't go for beauty or luxury because, oh, that costs too much. Well,
Oh,
that's
and
part
I,
of the whole
for
system.
me, it comes up as guilt. Like, why should I have that? Or,
I
we
want
should conserve or,
no,
be,
no. No, yes, you're probably right. It does come up as guilt for a lot of people, but it comes up as guilt because beauty has been tied to money and money has been taken away from us. Money is part of the control system. And if
yes.
you don't have enough money, you can't buy beauty.
Yeah. And you brought up something. I am so sick of money, Penny.
Oh,
I am so tired of
yeah. We should talk
even
about that.
it's like I am so tired of the whole paradigm of money. Our society runs on money instead of integrity.
I
And
know.
if it ran on integrity, money it would
Yeah.
be such an afterthought.
There are civilizations that do not have or use money. I just recently was thinking, this is a couple of weeks ago. Okay, I know a few people that have civilizations that don't have money. I'm going to see if I can connect with them and, have this conversation about, okay, how'd you guys do it? What is the secret? What can
And
we
how
do?
nice is it? It's
Oh,
like, oh, wouldn't it be so nice? The whole money thing, it's like there's so much ugh that comes with money.
no, that's true. And we have a money system that is so ugly right
It's
now.
abusive. It's abusive.
It is.
So, what did you find out when you connected with someone that lives in a society that doesn't have money?
Well, I didn't ask them yet. I
Oh,
noticed that they don't have money, and they have said, well, we don't use money. And I'm like, okay. And I was so shocked. This was years ago that I was like, is that possible? And so just recently, I thought, I'm going to go back and ask them, okay, all right, what's the secret?
yeah.
What do we need to know?
Aren't there some indigenous cultures on the planet that don't use money on Earth?
I think there probably are. Well, there's two that I know of that don't have any need for money. Why? Because they have learned how to use consciousness to manifest what they need. And
Ah,
they have set themselves up to need almost nothing. So when you have everything you need, which is shelter, safety, security, food, good companionship, beauty. They are surrounded by beauty. Oh, wow. And they've learned how to create, I'm going to call it a summer all year long. And they're not in a climate that summer would be all year long. Summer would
Okay,
be
I'm going there.
okay.
That's where I'm gonna go.
I know. So they have learned to do things with consciousness that we have not even asked or really believed was possible.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, it's I'm gonna go back and at least see if I can connect and if I can get at least a beginning answer to that
mhm,
question. I think personally that we're gonna find out what it's like to not be dealing with money in this year. And I'm just gonna say, don't freak out, people.
yeah,
Having no money doesn't mean you don't have food, clothing, shelter, etc. And I've been saying this everywhere and probably bears repeating here. If the financial system goes down and the naughty boys take that system down, that's their system, that's their problem. Don't come
mhm,
trying to take my stuff away just because your thing isn't working.
mhm.
Stand your ground. Don't hand over your house. Don't hand over your car. Don't hand over your stuff. They need to get themselves. Well, I don't know that they ever would, but it's gonna come to a standoff
Yeah.
and stand your ground.
Penny, I just looked at the clock and oh my gosh, we've got to wrap up here. This has been so wonderful.
Ah,
I have learned so much and I've been following you for years, so I would imagine the viewers are really have a lot to think about. So thank you for sharing.
yeah. Let me say something before we close altogether. I hope, for those of you listening, I hope I haven't upset you or pulled the rug out too much from under you. It is really important to start expanding a little at a time, little by little. So my intent is not to upset or to make life difficult. It is really to give you an edge that allows you to move forward with everything you've got.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Penny. And we can find out more about you at pennykelly.com. You have so many books. I would recommend if this is new to you, start with the robes.
yeah,
If you're a little bit down the road, the revival, and then there's consciousness volume 1, 2, 3, all the way up to volume 6 or
four,
7.
four.
4, okay. Plus Penny Kelly has classes on consciousness, which are superb. So Penny, I hope you'll come back and see us
I will.
again.
I
This is
will.
just the beginning of the story. We have so many wonderful things here to do on the planet.
That's true. And I would love to come back. And I think, if people have questions and they send those questions in or they list them in the comments, we can maybe address some of those.
Okay.
It's a little bit daunting to get your mind around the level of change that's happening, but I think it's a good change.
Yeah. And we're humans and we're incredible and we can do this.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Penny. We'll see you next time.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.